The glare of the mid-morning California sun was relentless against the floorboards, but the shadow cutting across the porch didn't match the angle of the palm trees. I stopped reviewing the ledger on my tablet, the quiet hum of the ocean breeze suddenly drowned out by a distinct, heavy footstep on the gravel outside. I stood in the doorway of the coastal boutique, the rough fabric of my dark textured suit jacket absorbing the ambient heat. Sadie stepped beside me. She wore a peach tank top that contrasted sharply with the bright, almost aggressive blonde of her hair, which she had tied back into two high pigtails. The large gold hoops in her ears caught the sunlight, throwing small crescent reflections against her jaw. Her face was tense, her strikingly full lips pressed together in a tight line of frustration. She reached out, her fingers gripping the heavy linen fabric of the patio curtain, pulling it back just an inch. "Look properly this time," she whispered. I leaned in, my shoulder stopping exactly 1 inch from hers. Outside, standing near the property line marker, was a man in a pale blue polo shirt taking photographs of the boutique's foundation. It was Vance, the property developer who had recently bought out the original landlord of this stretch of the sunny California coast. His camera wasn't pointed at the beautiful bay windows. It was pointed at the minor water damage on the lower stucco, a purely cosmetic issue. He was documenting a narrative, a false one. The sudden stillness in my chest told me everything I needed to know about how this day was going to pivot. Sadie dropped the curtain. The linen settled back into place, cutting off the blinding sunlight and plunging us back into the cool, shadowed safety of her shop. "He's been out there 3 times this week, Theo," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor she tried to hide by adjusting a display of ceramic vases. I kept my hands buried deep in my pockets, my knuckles brushing the lining of my slacks to prevent myself from reaching out to steady her wrist. The age difference between us, 10 years of life experience she had over me, the fact that I had grown up alongside her son, always made the air between us feel thick with an unspoken boundary. I exhaled slowly, my voice dropping to its usual low, measured cadence. "He's building a file." She turned to face me, her blue eyes wide with a sudden, sharp realization. "A file for what? I've never missed a payment. The boutique is profitable. My lease doesn't expire for another 2 years." She walked over to the wooden counter, her sandals clicking against the hardwood. "He left an envelope in the mail slot this morning. I didn't want to open it until you got here." I approached the counter. The envelope was standard, legally formatted stock. "Open it," I said softly. She slid her thumbnail under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of heavy bond paper. I watched her read it, her shoulders dropping a fraction of an inch with every line. She didn't hand it to me right away. She just stared at the bold print at the top. "It's a 30-day notice," she breathed, the sound barely carrying over the distant crashing waves. "He's citing a breach of contract. Something about structural negligence and unapproved commercial modifications." "Let me see this specific clause." I kept my voice flat, a calm anchor against her rising panic. She slid the paper across the polished wood. My eyes scanned the text. It was a classic pressure tactic. Vance was citing Section 4B of the outdated municipal code, claiming her retail display shelves compromised the load-bearing integrity of the historic property. It was nonsense, but it was expensive, legally exhausting nonsense designed to make a tenant walk away rather than fight. I pulled my phone from my pocket and set it face down on the counter, giving her my absolute, undivided attention. "He doesn't have the leverage he thinks he does, Sadie. We are going to map this out." The quiet certainty in my words made her exhale, a long, shaky breath that finally broke the tension in her shoulders. Tuesday afternoon smelled of old paper, binding glue, and the sharp tang of espresso. I had commandeered the back office of Sadie's boutique. The space was cramped, filled with inventory boxes and the faint, lingering scent of the vanilla candles she sold up front. I had 3 laptops open and a stack of municipal zoning records I'd pulled from the county database. Sadie walked in, carefully balancing 2 mugs of dark roast. She set one down near my right hand, right on the coaster, avoiding the spread of documents. "You've been staring at that screen for 4 hours, Theo. Your eyes are going to cross." "I'm tracing the LLC structure of Vance's holding company," I said, my voice barely above a murmur. I didn't look up, letting the rhythm of my keystrokes fill the silence. "He's using a nested corporate shell. It's sloppy." I opened the K1 schedule cross-reference program I built for audits. Within 40 seconds, I found the discrepancy. "Look at this." She leaned over my chair. I could feel the ambient warmth radiating from her. A sudden shift in the room's atmosphere that made my throat tight. I kept my posture rigid, my focus locked entirely on the glowing screen. "He filed a depreciation recapture exemption for this specific address last fiscal year," I explained, pointing to the highlighted digital cell. "He claimed the property was strictly residential to avoid a commercial tax hike. Now, he's issuing you an eviction notice citing commercial code violations. You can't have it both ways." If he submits this eviction notice to a judge, he inadvertently submits proof of his own tax fraud. Sadie stared at the numbers. "I don't know what half of those words mean, Theo." "It means," I said, finally turning my head to look at her, "he built a trap, and I just found the switch to close it on his own hand." A small, genuine smile broke across her face, softening the sharp anxiety that had been etched there since yesterday. It was the first time I'd seen her smile like that in days. A quiet victory that made the 4 hours of eye-straining analysis entirely worth it. "You're terrifying when you do that, you know," she said softly. "I'm thorough," I corrected, turning back to the screen. I carefully saved the digital footprint, locking the files behind a dual encryption protocol. "But we need the original lease addendum to prove you were granted commercial use by the previous owner." "Where is it?" Her smile faltered. "It's in the archives downtown." I never got a hard copy from the old landlord. He just filed it with the city records before he sold the place. "Then we go downtown tomorrow." The records building was a brutalist block of concrete that smelled of floor wax and bureaucratic apathy. Thursday morning, the line at the clerk's desk was agonizingly slow. Sadie stood next to me, shifting her weight from foot to foot. She looked out of place here in her vibrant sundress, a bright splash of coastal color against the dreary gray walls. A woman, 2 people ahead of us in line, turned around. She was a local real estate agent, someone I vaguely recognized from the coastal council meetings. She looked Sadie up and down, a thin, patronizing smile on her face. "Sadie, isn't it? I heard about the boutique. Such a shame Vance is pushing you out. I always said that location was too premium for a little craft shop. I'm representing a high-end coffee chain that's looking at the space once you're cleared out." Sadie stiffened, her hands wrapping tightly around the strap of her leather purse. The air in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees. I stepped forward, moving just half a pace ahead of Sadie, placing myself firmly between her and the agent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "The property is currently under a protected multi-year commercial lease," I said, my tone quiet, clipped, and absolute. "Any negotiation regarding future tenancy is tortious interference with an active contract. If your client submits a letter of intent to Vance while Ms. Jenkins holds legal occupancy, I will personally refer the communication to the State Real Estate Board for ethics review." The agent's smile vanished. She blinked, her eyes darting from my dark, formal suit to my completely unbothered expression. I was just making conversation." "It was the wrong conversation," I said softly. I turned my back to her, dismissing her entirely, and looked down at Sadie. Her grip on her purse had loosened. She wasn't looking at the agent anymore. She was looking at me. I offered a slight, grounding nod. The world outside could throw whatever it wanted at her, but in this specific radius, I controlled the variables. We reached the clerk and retrieved the addendum. As we walked back to the car, the coastal fog began to roll in, chilling the air. I unlocked the passenger side of my sedan for her. Before she got in, she paused, her hand resting on the doorframe. "Thank you, Theo. Back there. I usually just let people like her talk until they get tired." "You shouldn't have to," I replied, keeping my hands resting lightly on the roof of the car. I wanted to reach out, to brush a stray blonde hair away from her face, but the ghost of her son, my friend, and the invisible barrier of her age and status held me firmly in place. My discipline was my armor. "Get in. It's getting cold." The following Tuesday, the pressure escalated. I was sitting on the wooden steps of Sadie's back porch, the ocean churning aggressively in the distance. The coastal wind was picking up, rattling the wind chimes hanging from the eaves. I was running a final audit on Vance's LLC when the boutique's back door slammed open. Sadie stepped out holding her phone. Her face was pale. "Vance just emailed me. He's not waiting 30 days. He's executing a lockout protocol this Friday. He claims the structural issue is an immediate public hazard, and he has a contractor coming to board up the windows." I closed my laptop with a sharp click. The sound was small, but it cut through the noise of the wind. He can't do that without a municipal safety inspector's sign-off. He said he has it. He attached a PDF. She handed me the phone. I zoomed in on the document. The signature block belonged to a private structural engineer, not a city official. It was a paid consultation masquerading as a legal mandate. It was a bluff, but a dangerous one. If he boarded the windows, the loss of foot traffic would bankrupt her in a week, even if we won the lawsuit later. "He's forcing the timeline," I said, handing the phone back. The wind whipped a strand of hair across her face, and she looked smaller in that moment, exhausted by the relentless weight of someone trying to erase her livelihood. "I can't fight a construction crew, Theo. If they show up Friday..." She sank onto the wooden step beside me, pulling her knees up. "Maybe I should just take the buyout he offered last week. It's barely enough to cover moving costs, but at least it ends this." "No." The word left my mouth before I could analyze it. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a refusal to let her surrender. I turned to look at her, my voice dropping back to that low, steady frequency. "You built this place. You don't walk away because a bully bought a fake piece of paper." "But how do we stop a crew on Friday morning?" "We remove his legal authority to touch the building." I stood up, the plan already organizing itself into clean, sequential steps in my mind. "I'm going to file an emergency injunction tomorrow morning based on the tax fraud evidence, but to make it stick before Friday, I need you to do something difficult." She looked up at me, her eyes searching my face. "What?" "You have to call Vance. You have to tell him you're rejecting his buyout, and you're aware of his K1 schedule discrepancy. You have to hold the line on the phone while I file the paperwork." Her breath hitched. Confrontation wasn't her nature. She preferred to absorb, to adapt, to survive. Pushing back directly against a man with millions in capital terrified her. "Theo, I don't know if I can sound convincing." "You don't need to sound convincing. You just need to read exactly what I write down for you." I knelt on the porch so I was at eye level with her. The wind howled around us, but in this small space, the noise faded into a quiet stillness. "I will be sitting right across from you. I'm not letting him take this from you." The vulnerability in her eyes shifted into something else, a quiet, blooming trust. She gave a single firm nod. Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., the boutique was closed to the public. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. I sat on the small velvet sofa in the center of the room, my laptop open on the coffee table. Sadie stood by the window, her phone in her hand. I had written 3 sentences on a notepad and placed it on the glass display case. "Dial. I said quietly. She pressed the call button and put it on speaker. It rang twice before Vance picked up. "Sadie," his voice boomed through the small speaker laced with a false, practiced sympathy. "I hope you're calling to accept the terms. Friday is going to be very disruptive for your inventory if you're still in the building." Sadie looked at me. I gave her a steady, grounding nod. She looked down at the notepad. "I am rejecting your buyout, Vance," she said, her voice shaking slightly on the first syllable before stabilizing. "Sadie, let's be reasonable. The engineer's report is a private consultation, not a municipal mandate," she interrupted, reading the second line. Her voice grew stronger. "Furthermore, if a crew arrives on Friday, my forensic accountant will submit your previous year's depreciation recapture exemption to the state tax board, proving you committed perjury regarding the commercial status of this property." Silence hung heavy on the line. I watched Vance's entire legal strategy evaporate in the span of 4 seconds. "You don't know what you're talking about," Vance finally muttered, the false warmth entirely gone, replaced by a cold, nervous edge. "We have the K1 schedules," Sadie said, delivering the final line without looking at the paper. She was looking at me. "Do not send your crew." She pressed end call. The silence that followed was profound. Sadie set the phone down on the glass case. Her hands were shaking. She let out a long, shaky exhale, leaning back against the wooden counter. "He hung up." "He's calling his lawyer," I corrected, closing my laptop. "And his lawyer is going to tell him to back off immediately, because tax fraud carries federal penalties, and a local zoning dispute does not. The injunction is filed." Sadie walked toward me. The space between us, usually guarded by a decade of age and a lifetime of history, suddenly felt irrelevant. She stopped 2 feet away, the relief washing over her face so completely that it looked like she might collapse. I stood up, my instinct screaming to pull her into my arms, to let her bury her face in my shoulder. Instead, I kept my hands at my sides. I maintained the boundary. The distance was my respect for her autonomy. "You did it," I said softly. She took the final step, breaking the boundary herself. She didn't hug me. She just rested her forehead against the center of my chest. I froze. The sudden warmth of her against the cold fabric of my suit jacket sent a shockwave of stillness through my system. I didn't wrap my arms around her. I simply placed one hand lightly on her shoulder, a grounding tether in the quiet room. The chaos of Vance, the eviction, the deadlines, it all vanished, blocked out by this simple, functional point of contact. The tremor in her breathing slowed. The world stopped spinning. Friday morning arrived without the sound of construction trucks. The coastal fog burned off early, leaving a brilliant, clear sky. Vance's lawyer had sent a formal email Thursday night withdrawing the eviction notice pending further review, a cowardly retreat veiled in legal jargon. The final resolution happened the following Wednesday at the municipal notary office. We needed to formally register the original commercial addendum to prevent any future loopholes. The office was bright, smelling of lemon polish and fresh ink. Sadie sat at the wide wooden table signing the final page of the registry. I stood slightly behind her, reviewing the notary's stamp. The clerk, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, took the document and slid it into a heavy manila folder. "All set, Ms. Jenkins," the clerk said. He looked past her, glancing at me. "You're lucky to have a partner who knows how to navigate this mess. Most people just fold when the big developers push." Sadie didn't correct him. She didn't say, "He's just my son's friend," or "He's just my accountant." She stood up, picked up her purse, and turned to face me. The insecurity about our ages, the hesitation, the quiet boundaries we had walked around for 8 weeks, none of it was in her eyes anymore. She reached out and took my hand.
It wasn't a desperate grip. It was a calm, deliberate choice made in a public room.
"Yes," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I am." She squeezed my fingers once, a transfer of absolute stability. A promise sealed without a single grand speech. We walked out of the office together, the heavy glass doors closing behind us, stepping out into the bright, unquestionable warmth of the California sun. I learned that true safety in a relationship isn't about grand rescues or passionate speeches. Real love is found in the quiet consistency of showing up, handling the hard facts, and respecting someone's autonomy enough to let them fight their own battles while you guard their back. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.